Hi, my name's Morwenna. 3 months ago, I was lying in a hospital bed. My heart was failing. The doctor told the nurse, "Tonight may be the last." And do you know what my parents said when the hospital called? "We can't come. Callista's walking the dog." Not, "We'll be there soon." Not, "Keep her stable." Just, Snowy needed his walk. That was the moment I stopped asking them to love me. But it wasn't the first time they chose my sister's comfort over my survival. I've been erased from birthday cakes, family photos, even our emergency contact list. They planned a trust fund for the dog and forgot I was still alive. I left them a letter in that hospital room. But what I wrote might finally say what they refused to hear. Would you have stayed if you were me? Would you still call that family? They always say the emergency room smells the same, antiseptic and dread. But that night, I smelled nothing. My nostrils barely responded. My chest tightened with each passing second, like someone had placed a cinder block on top of my lungs. Nurses moved fast, shouting numbers I couldn't keep up with. The monitor beeping beside me was the only sound I could latch onto. I remember the sharp sting of an IV needle, the soft buzz of fluorescent lights above, and the cold truth settling beneath my skin. I was dying. Maybe not dramatically, not movie style, but real, medical, clinical. My heart rate was low, my blood pressure dipping. They told me later that I was slipping under, that if my vitals didn't stabilize by dawn, I might not make it. I didn't cry. There's no time to cry when your body is too busy shutting down. What I do remember, clear as day, is the nurse's voice saying, "We've called your family. They should be on their way." A flicker of hope stirred, even in that hazy state. For a moment, I imagined my mother's arms around me. I could hear the panic in her voice, picture my father stumbling into the hospital with his tie loosened, sweat on his brow, muttering, "Where's my daughter?" But the only call that went through was to my mother's cell. I was told later what she said, casually, without hesitation. "Now's not a good time," she said. "Callista's walking Snowy." The doctor froze. The nurse beside him dropped her clipboard. The silence that followed wasn't professional. It was human. That kind of silence where everyone in the room realizes something sacred has just shattered. I didn't hear those words myself, not at the time, but I felt them, like a ghost brushing against my ear, whispering, "They're not coming." They didn't come. My body gave up first. My mind followed slowly, retreating into half-dreams where I was 7 again, waiting for someone to show up to my school science fair. I'd won second place. I stood next to my cardboard volcano, clutching my ribbon, scanning the crowd for a familiar face. Nobody came. Another flicker of memory, the prom night where I waited by the door, dress on, makeup done, holding my breath for a mother who said she'd take pictures before I left. She was 30 minutes late. Then an hour. I finally called a cab. And graduation. 2 empty seats in the front row, reserved with their names. Everyone else was surrounded by hugs, applause. I stood with my honors cords and a smile so tight it made my jaw ache. They were never monsters, I remember telling myself. Just people who always saw me as the one who didn't need them. Back in the present, a nurse leaned over. Her voice was warm, trembling with practiced empathy. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "your family's not here, but I am." I couldn't respond. My tongue felt swollen, my lips barely moved, but I heard her. I knew what she meant. Then came the transfusion. In my file, under emergency contact, someone had typed in, "None confirmed, no family present." That detail, just 6 words, haunted me more than the machines, more than the possibility of death. Because in that moment, in the most sterile, bureaucratic way possible, I'd been made invisible. My blood was failing. My body was at war with itself. And no one from my so-called family thought I was worth the drive. The red bag of O negative hung above me, a lifeline from a stranger. I remember thinking, so this is how I survive, on the kindness of people who don't even know my name. I wanted to scream. Not from pain, but from the echoing realization that if I died that night, the only ones who'd notice would be the nurses filling out my chart and the neighbor feeding my cat. Somewhere else in the city, as I laid there between life and nothing, My sister Callista was tossing a frisbee to her dog in the park. Snowy, the white, overfed Samoyed she treated like royalty. He had custom bowls, an Instagram page, a cooling vest for summer. She carried his poop in bags more carefully than they'd ever carried my emotions. I imagine her laughing, her long hair tied back, sunglasses on, perfect smile catching the sunset. Mom sitting on a bench nearby, chatting about an upcoming wine tasting, Dad nodding along, pretending to care. "It's such a nice evening," I heard her say in my mind. "She'll be fine. She always is." I used to be. At least, that's what I let them believe. The heart monitor beeped again, then dipped. A nurse adjusted something beside me, her fingers shaking just slightly. They never tell you how much humanity leaks through when someone's trying not to panic. I drifted further. "They're not coming," I kept thinking. "They're not coming." I don't know if it was the medicine, the blood loss, or just years of emotional suppression, but somewhere in that fog, I began to let go. Not of life, but of the idea that I had ever truly belonged to them. The delusion cracked. I saw it for what it was, a myth I'd carried since childhood, that if I were just good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, one day I'd earn my place at the table. But the truth was laid bare, clinical and cold, in that ER. I was a daughter by biology only, not by bond, not by love. And somehow, in the stillness, that realization was louder than the flatline that followed. The blood had already started to dry by the time I locked the bathroom door behind me. My hand throbbed from the bite, a thin crescent of red breaking the skin near the knuckle. I grabbed a tissue, cheap, hotel grade, and pressed it against the wound. It crinkled under the pressure, already spotted with blood from where I'd tried to pretend it didn't hurt. The bathroom smelled like lavender and bleach. My mother always used too much cleaning spray, the kind that stung your nose. It brought back another memory, uninvited. Me at 15, locked in this same bathroom after she told me, "Try to stay in the background during dinner tonight, okay? Your sister had a rough day." As if I'd planned to stage a Broadway number at the table. I leaned over the sink and stared into the mirror. Not for drama, just to see if I still recognized myself after all this. My reflection looked tired, older, not older like age, but older like worn. Outside the door, the murmur of voices continued as if nothing had happened. I could hear Callista's high-pitched laugh, Snowy barking, the clink of cutlery, and the sound of my mother saying, "He didn't mean it, she just startles him. Just startles him." That's what they settled on. The bite was my fault, like everything else. You'd think after a lifetime of this, I would have built up calluses, that I'd be numb to it by now, but pain has this way of finding new angles, new pressure points. Especially when it comes in the shape of your own mother excusing a dog for biting her child. I rinsed my hand, ignoring the sting. The blood swirled down the drain, a thin spiral, fading fast. Just like my place in this house. The night had started differently. Less than 3 hours earlier, I'd been cautiously optimistic. I know how that sounds, naive even, but when your mother calls you out of the blue and says, "I was thinking it would be nice to have you over this Saturday," you want to believe something shifted. She even said she was making my favorite, lasagna with extra ricotta. It had been years since she'd offered that. I bought a decent bottle of red, not too cheap, not overcompensating. I chose a sweater that didn't itch, took 2 antihistamines before I left the apartment. A part of me even smiled at the idea of her finally noticing, finally acknowledging that I wasn't the child who demanded anything, but maybe I deserved something anyway. When I arrived, the porch light was already on. That small gesture nearly undid me. Inside, she hugged me, a full 2 seconds longer than usual. I told myself to relax, to stop reading into everything. The lasagna was already on the table, warm and fragrant. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, this could be a new beginning. Then I heard it, the bark. Not from outside, not from a kennel, from the living room. Snowy. Snowy. The $1,000 dog who ate organic lamb and drank filtered water. Snowy, whose fur I couldn't be near without my eyes puffing up and my lungs tightening. I froze in the hallway. "Is Snowy here?" My mother looked up from the table like it was the most casual thing in the world. Of course. He lives here. Callista's staying the weekend. I opened my mouth, hesitated. Mom, you know I'm allergic. She waved her hand, already turning back to set out plates. You'll be fine for one night. Just take a pill. Callista appeared then, all legs and glossed lips, barefoot in a silk robe like she was royalty. Hey sis, she said without looking up. He's clean. We had him groomed yesterday. Groomed. As if dander were the only issue. As if my immune system gave a damn about his haircut. I sat at the table anyway, not because I was spineless, but because I'd driven 40 minutes, brought a gift, and put my fragile hope on the line. Walking out felt like admitting I was still that kid waiting for a ride that never came. So I stayed. We ate. Or rather, they ate. I pushed food around my plate, nodding through their conversation about Snowy's new chew toy, his socialization class, the doggy playdate someone at the park invited them to. Every time I tried to bring up my job, my recent promotion, they nodded like I'd spoken in another language, and returned to whatever Snowy did that morning. The tightness in my chest came gradually. I could feel it building, a slow twist beneath my ribs. My skin itched, my arms flushed with red splotches. Still, I sat there. Still, I smiled, until the bite. We had finished eating. I was standing near the hallway when Snowy bounded toward me, barking like a siren. I froze, held my hands up instinctively. He leapt, and his teeth caught my hand. It wasn't deep, but it was enough. I gasped. Callista didn't move. My mother rushed forward, straight to the dog. "Oh, baby, are you okay?" she cooed, scooping Snowy into her arms like he'd been assaulted. "He's just sensitive to energy. You must have startled him." Startled him. My hand bled, and the story was already being rewritten. I walked away, stepped into the bathroom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell, because yelling doesn't exist in our family unless it's about a spilled wine glass or a scratched floorboard. We don't fight in my house. We deflect. We minimize. We redirect. Standing there, watching blood slide down my fingers, I realized something that shouldn't have taken me 31 years to learn. I was not invisible by accident. They had made me invisible, and I had let them. But not anymore. I opened the medicine cabinet, found the ointment and a bandage, wrapped my hand tight. Then I looked at myself in the mirror again, not for sympathy, but to mark the moment. I was done pretending this was okay. I didn't cry, but I felt something crack. If pain had a sound, mine would be quiet, always quiet. I didn't send the message. The cursor blinked for a long time before I hit delete. Then I deleted the whole family group thread, not just archived it. I erased it. There was something final about it, like closing a door not out of anger but exhaustion. The next morning, I woke up feeling heavier. Not the kind of heavy that comes from sadness, but the weight of finally admitting something you've known for years. They were never going to change. That realization didn't come out of nowhere. It had been accumulating, quietly, consistently. Little acts, small omissions, things no one outside the family would ever consider cruel on their own. But together they built the wall I now stood behind, invisible to the people who were supposed to know me best. I remember my graduation day better than I'd like to admit. Valedictorian. Full scholarship. My name had been printed in the local paper. There were 2 seats saved with signs. My parents' names printed neatly in Sharpie on plain white cardstock. I stood on that stage in a cheap robe, delivering a speech I'd written the night before because I didn't want to overthink it. I remember my voice cracking on the second paragraph. I paused, looked into the crowd, and saw nothing but strangers. Strangers clapping for me, nodding politely. The 2 seats in the front row sat empty the whole ceremony. Later that night, I walked home alone. In heels. I passed a dozen families taking pictures outside the venue. Moms in floral dresses, dads carrying gift bags, siblings holding flowers. One boy's younger sister gave him a glittery card and burst into tears. I remember thinking, no one's going to cry for me today. That was the night I started carrying my own keys to everything. They never apologized for missing it. When I asked, weeks later, my mom said, "You know your father doesn't like large crowds." And then casually added, "Besides, Callista had a photo shoot for Snowy that afternoon. She needed help getting him groomed." A photo shoot for the dog. I stopped asking for explanations after that. Years later, I tried again. Tried something simple. My grandmother was turning 85, and I thought, this is my chance to be seen. I called the bakery, ordered a cake, vanilla with strawberry filling, her favorite. I told them to write, "Happy birthday, Grandma. With love, Morwenna." Paid for it online, confirmed delivery. The party was that weekend. I didn't go. I had to work, and honestly, I wasn't invited. But I saw the photos. They posted them everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, even a short clip on TikTok. Everyone was smiling, crowded around the cake, and right there, in the center of the frame, was the icing. "Happy birthday, Grandma. With love, Callista." I thought maybe it was a mistake, that someone had swapped the card, that it had been an honest mix-up. Until I saw the caption under one of the photos. "Callista is always so thoughtful. She never forgets anyone's special day." Not a single comment mentioned me, not a correction, not even a Morwenna helped too. When I called Mom about it later, just to understand, she said, "Well, sweetie, Callista was there. You weren't." It just made more sense. I hung up mid-sentence. How do you become invisible in your own family? One small erasure at a time. A skipped name here, a photo cropped there, a story told slightly differently than how it happened. Suddenly, you're not the sibling who helped, who tried, who remembered. You're the one who never really got involved. I started to piece it all together. The report card I brought home in 7th grade, straight A's. My mother skimmed it, handed it back and said, "Good job." The same week, Callista brought home a B- in art and it got framed. My first job interview, they forgot to ask how it went. That same afternoon, Callista adopted a rescue puppy and they posted a "Welcome Home Snowy" collage online with 6 photos and a poem about unconditional love. When I got my driver's license. "Finally, one less thing to worry about," my dad muttered. When Callista passed hers, they threw a backyard cookout, balloons and everything. They always had a seat for me at the table, I once told myself, but never in their hearts. The more I remembered, the more I realized this wasn't accidental. This wasn't just how some families work. It was a pattern, a script, one I'd been trying to rewrite alone. It's funny what people choose to remember and what they pretend to forget. I started writing things down, not for revenge, not for proof, just so I wouldn't gaslight myself anymore. So that when I doubted what I felt, I could look at the list and remind myself I wasn't crazy. I titled the file, "Things I Don't Imagine." Graduation seats, never filled. Birthday cake credit given to someone else. Allergy reactions laughed off. My promotion skipped in favor of a post about Snowy's new bow tie. That list is 47 entries long, and counting. One night, around midnight, I sat at my desk, reading through a chain of family messages. Most were about dinner plans, who was bringing what for Easter, and whether Callista should wear blue or cream for Snowy's spring photo shoot. Not a single message asked how I was doing. No one asked about the medication I'd just started. No one remembered I had a surgery scheduled next week. I scrolled up. 6 months back. Still nothing. That was the moment I deleted the thread. All of it. I stared at the empty screen for a while. The cursor blinked. I opened a new message box and typed, "I saw the cake. Thanks for making my absence so effortless." I read it 3 times. Then I closed the window, because some silences deserve to stay silent, but some silences become screams once you stop swallowing them. The cursor had gone still on the screen. I'd hovered over it for too long, the white space blinding in the dark room. I didn't press send. I didn't need to. The real message wasn't in what I wrote. It was in what I stopped tolerating. The next morning started like any other. I made my coffee. I opened my planner, checked off a few to-dos, but the heaviness had shifted. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was a steady, quiet burn. A flicker of something that might one day be called clarity. Later that afternoon, I opened Facebook and saw the live stream. It was a retirement party for a family friend, someone who used to babysit me and Callista when we were little. I hadn't seen her in years, but I remembered how she always slipped me a butterscotch when my parents weren't looking. I liked her. So when I heard about her retirement, I sent a small but meaningful gift, a crystal photo frame with a handwritten card tucked inside. It said, "Thank you for always seeing me. With love, Morwenna." Simple, sincere. But on the live stream, my mother was standing at the front of the room, holding up the frame. "This is from your favorite girl," she said with a smile, pausing for effect. "Callista." Everyone clapped. My name was never mentioned. I blinked, stared at the screen. At first I thought maybe she just misspoke, or maybe someone had swapped the card by mistake. Until I saw it again, a close-up shot from another angle. My handwriting was still faintly visible underneath the new card. The top layer had been glued over. Someone had crossed out my name, literally covered it up. I rewound the video 3 times. Same moment, same smile, same room full of people applauding something that wasn't real. That night, I didn't sleep. And not because I was angry, though I was. It was something deeper, a kind of slow-burning humiliation. The kind that doesn't shout. It just settles into your bones, rewrites your sense of self a little more each time. It wasn't just about a gift or a party. It was about every time my contributions were rebranded. Every time my kindness was stolen, repackaged under Callista's name, and sold back to me as proof that I didn't matter as much. People ask, "Are you sure it's not just a misunderstanding?" Let me tell you something. Misunderstanding doesn't happen 50 times in the same direction. A week later, I went to the emergency room with a coworker who'd twisted her ankle during a fire drill. She didn't want to go alone, and I had a flexible afternoon, so I offered to drive. We sat in the waiting room, and when the triage nurse started processing her info, I stepped away to the front desk to update my own records. I'd had a few changes, new insurance, new number, a new specialist I needed listed. I handed the clipboard back. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman in blue scrubs, squinted at her monitor. "You don't have an emergency contact listed," she said. I paused. "Really? That's strange. It used to be my mom." She tilted her head. "Let me check. Looks like someone removed your prior contact last year. There's only one person on file now, Callista." She said it like it was normal, like being erased by your own family was a clerical update. I walked back to the waiting area like someone had sucked the air out of me. I sat beside my coworker, smiled politely, and waited for the nurse to call her in. But inside, I broke a little more. This wasn't miscommunication. This wasn't one bad moment. This was erasure, on paper, in practice, and now, officially, in hospital records. Later that night, I went through old family albums. I hadn't opened them in years, but they were still tucked on the bottom shelf of my living room cabinet, covered in dust, labeled with perfect handwriting. Wilson family, holidays. Wilson family, vacations. I flipped through them slowly, page after page, Callista in the center, Mom holding her hand, Dad lifting her on his shoulders, me in the background, if I was in the shot at all. Sometimes a partial arm, a blurred figure near the tree, a face blocked by someone else's elbow. And then, finally, there was one photo from a Thanksgiving in Asheville. We were sitting around the table. My plate was already cleared, and I was looking straight at the camera, smiling small. The caption underneath read, "Everyone together. A perfect holiday." But the edge of the photo had been torn. The corner where I sat was cut off. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just closed the album. Because this wasn't memory loss. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. Callista had a whole shrine. Birthday posters, scrapbooks, even a digital photo frame that updated with new pictures every holiday. I remember when she turned 16, Mom threw a surprise party and hired a photographer. They took more photos of the dog that day than they'd ever taken of me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. A few days later, I sat across from my therapist, Janine, in her small office with faded walls and a squeaky chair. I liked her because she didn't try too hard. She didn't coddle. She just listened, then asked the one question I wasn't ready for. What would happen if you stopped trying to be visible to people who only see what they want? I stared at her. Are you saying I should give up? I'm saying, she said gently, maybe visibility isn't something you earn from others. Maybe it's something you claim for yourself. I left that session with a fog in my chest. I wasn't sure if it was grief or relief. That night I sat at my desk, opened the folder I usually reserved for work forms and insurance documents. I pulled out the advance medical directive. It had been in there for months, blank, untouched. I opened the form, scrolled to the section, next of kin to notify. There it was, Callista's name, in bold. I hovered my mouse. Delete. I typed in a new name, Evadine. She was my neighbor, a retired nurse who lived across the hall. She'd brought me soup after my last allergic reaction, fed my cat when I was in the hospital. She had no obligation to care, but she showed up anyway, which is more than I could say for my family. I saved the document, printed it, filed it into the cabinet under a new label, people who would actually come. Some ties aren't broken, they were never knotted to begin with. After I closed the document and hit save, I didn't feel victorious, just steady, the way you feel after closing a door that had been stuck open too long, letting in cold you didn't realize was making you sick. My name, Morwenna, stood next to Evadine's now, not Vera, not Clyde. It was a short change, barely a few keystrokes, but it felt like the first time in my life I chose who got to matter. Later that evening, I lit a candle, not for mood but for focus. It had a vanilla scent, a little too sweet for my taste, but familiar. I opened a fresh notebook, not my therapy journal, not my work log, just a blank one, unclaimed by anyone else's expectations. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Letter to my parents." Then I just sat there. For 10 minutes, maybe 20, I stared at those 5 words. And then the sentences started falling out, not as rage, not as cries for understanding, but as quiet, well-earned lines of truth. You taught me that love is conditional, that presence is performance, that daughters must audition for affection. I wrote with precision, not poetry. I didn't dramatize. I didn't plead. I won awards. You praised the dog. I didn't accuse them of being monsters. That would have given them too much power. Instead, I chronicled the reality, the way some people love with asterisks, the way some parents hide their neglect under good manners and holiday cards. I know now I was never invisible. You saw me. You just didn't care enough to show up. Each paragraph was a small surgery, cutting out the rot and naming it. I didn't need them to bleed. I just needed to stop carrying their silence like a scar I had to hide. By the time I filled 4 pages, my hand was cramping. But something else had softened, a different kind of ache. When I finished, I signed my name, not with bitterness, just finality. Then I slid the letter into an envelope and labeled it in block letters, for Vera and Clyde. I tucked the envelope into my purse and walked into the kitchen. Evadine had let herself in, as she often did, using the spare key I gave her months ago when I was too sick to keep coming to the door. She was pouring tea. Her hands always moved slowly, deliberately, like she'd learned the hard way what it meant to be careful. Without a word, she handed me a cup. "They call it elderflower," she said, "but I think it just smells like forgiveness." I smiled, not because I agreed, but because I knew she meant well. We sat in silence for a while. I told her what I'd done, about the letter, the medical forms. She didn't ask for details. She just nodded. "You don't need their apology to heal," she said finally. "But you do need to stop bleeding for people who never noticed you were cut." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to debate. The next morning, I got dressed for my routine checkup. The hospital had scheduled it weeks before, just to make sure my flare-up hadn't left any lasting damage. I packed the envelope in my bag. I added one more thing, a photo from my childhood, one of the few where we were all in frame. In the picture, I was maybe 9. Callista was 6, already posing like she was on camera. My father was holding her. My mother stood behind them, her hand on Callista's shoulder. I was to the side, smiling too big, standing too straight, trying too hard to be seen. I'd torn myself out of the frame the night before and slipped the photo into the envelope with the letter and a copy of the new medical directive. It wasn't petty, it was honest. At the hospital, I checked in, waited in the pale blue lobby, filled with too much light and not enough warmth. When my name was called, I followed the nurse back. The usual vitals, the same sterile questions. How are you feeling? Stable. Any family you'd like us to update during your visit? That one made me pause. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope, and placed it on the bedside table. Just make sure that gets to them, I said. The nurse looked confused. Would you like us to call your parents? I shook my head. No, that envelope is the last thing I'll ever send. She nodded, didn't push, just picked up the envelope and slipped it into a folder on her clipboard. As I laid back on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, I thought about how different it felt this time. Same fluorescent lights, same sterile sheets. But I wasn't hoping someone would walk through the door. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your worth is to stop inviting people to prove they don't see it. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. My protection. I closed my eyes, not to sleep, but to remember what it felt like to rest without fear. But when silence becomes action, people start to hear you, even if too late. After I slipped the signed receipt into the drawer, I stood at my window for a long time. Raleigh looked small from up here, just scattered porch lights and the glow of late-shift traffic moving slowly down the avenue. There was no dramatic thunderclap, no tearful monologue, just stillness, a different kind of power, not loud, not angry, just done. The next day was quiet. I kept my phone on silent, not because I expected calls, but because I didn't want to break the spell. I'd drawn a line they couldn't cross. Not anymore. It wasn't even 10 a.m. when Vera called. I saw the name flash on the screen. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Hey honey, just wanted to say we're thinking of you. Why don't you come over this Saturday? I'll make that lemon cake you like. We miss you. I stared at the message, then played it again. My mother didn't say my name. She didn't mention the envelope I sent, the letter they surely read by now, or the documents that changed everything. Just a vague warmth, an invitation wrapped in denial. Still, I didn't delete it. That night, I mentioned it to Evadine while she was folding laundry in my living room. Maybe it's a trap, I said, half laughing. She looked at me over her glasses. Maybe, or maybe it's a final test. I raised an eyebrow. You go, but not as the daughter trying to earn a seat. Go with your eyes wide open. Take yourself, not your hope. Her words stayed with me. Saturday came too fast. I debated what to wear for too long. Ended up in something neutral, soft gray sweater, jeans that didn't hug too tight, flats instead of heels. I bought a bouquet of mixed flowers on the way. Nothing flashy, just polite. I pulled into their driveway at 4:35 p.m., 5 minutes ahead of schedule. The house looked the same. Perfect lawn, white shutters, Callista's car parked at an angle like she never really tried to fit in the lines. I reached for the bouquet. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Vera. Don't come. Callista's not feeling well. We don't want to risk anything. That was it. No apology, no reschedule. Just a digital lock on the door I'd been walking toward my whole life. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the reply button. Instead, I turned off the car, sat in silence, watched a squirrel dart across the lawn. In the window, I saw movement. Someone laughing. A glass raised. Voices inside. Not a sick day in sight. I didn't cry. I didn't drive away in a dramatic blur. I just backed out of the driveway, turned the corner, and drove to the grocery store. Bought myself a frozen pizza. Picked up Evadine's favorite chamomile tea. When I got home, there was a letter waiting in the mailbox, from a law office I didn't recognize. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, one shoe still on. The paper was heavy, the envelope sealed with a sticker that said, "Private." The letter was a formal notice regarding updates to the Wilson Family Trust. Apparently, I'd been CC'd by accident. The breakdown was simple. Callista, 45% Snowy, 15% in a separate pet trust, Morwenna. Omitted. I read it 3 times. Checked the name, checked the date. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. A dog had a legally protected inheritance, and I had nothing. I whispered it aloud, to no one. Even the dog's future is secured. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop I'd named long ago but never used. Emergency exit. Inside were drafts of documents I never thought I'd send, legal disclaimers, a list of financial accounts I'd closed, insurance updates, even the spreadsheet of old emails I'd archived, notes from Mom praising Callista for attending a charity gala while forgetting I'd just been discharged from the ER. I added one more file, the trust document. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I logged into my email, attached the legal forms and the letter again, just in case they tried to pretend they didn't receive the first one, and sent it to the same attorney who'd mailed the trust breakdown. Subject line: Confirmation of voluntary dissociation. Body: Kindly ensure my exclusion is complete, including all familial representation moving forward. I clicked send. Then I blocked the number of every contact I shared with them, one by one: Mom, Dad, Callista. Even the old house line I wasn't sure still worked. I wasn't broken. I was finished. I made dinner, burnt the edges of the pizza a little, but didn't care, poured a glass of wine, put on a playlist that didn't remind me of anyone. I opened a book I'd been meaning to read for a year and read the first 2 chapters without thinking of them once. At midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, quiet. In the distance, I could see downtown Raleigh twinkling like a memory that belonged to someone else. I held the return receipt from the certified letter I sent days ago. It was signed by someone, probably my father. I folded it in half and tucked it into the drawer with the others. Let them give the dog a legacy. I'm giving myself a future. But when you finally say no, people scramble to ask why. The morning after I sent that email, I made oatmeal and sat by the window like it was any other day. But something in the air felt off, not in the way you smell rain coming, more like the moment you realize the quiet isn't peace, but a pause before something cracks. By noon, the crack arrived. It started as a Reddit post. I wasn't even looking for it. Someone I followed reposted it with a comment. This broke me. The headline read, "She almost died, and her family didn't show up because they were walking a dog." I clicked. It wasn't written by me. It wasn't even shared by anyone I knew. It was a nurse, anonymous but detailed, the way only someone who had been there could write. She talked about the night I came in, pale, gasping for air, how the doctors had tried to contact next of kin and were told, "She'll be fine, we're busy with Snowy." She didn't name names, no identifying details, but the internet is efficient when it smells a story. Within hours, someone found my sister's public Instagram, Callista, with Snowy on a leash, captioned, "Self-Care Sunday." Dated the same evening I was fighting for my life. Then came the next wave. An old neighbor of ours, someone we hadn't seen in years, commented, "I used to live next to the Wilsons. This story sounds like them." Callista had a Samoyed named Snowy, always posted about him like he was a celebrity. That opened the floodgates. Photos, videos, screenshots. Callista's feed was dissected. Someone even matched the timeline of my ER admittance with her spa check-in post. "Snowy got a paw massage," the caption read. And the world? It responded exactly as you'd expect. Cruel, loud, relentless. Comments flooded in. Who raises a kid to be this self-centered? You let your sister die for a dog? This isn't a family, it's a brand. Within 24 hours, Callista's sponsors began dropping her. Her Instagram comments were turned off. Vera's Facebook profile vanished. Clyde, who never even posted, had his LinkedIn bombarded with messages. And me? I watched it all unfold from my couch, cup of tea in hand. I didn't comment. I didn't like or share. I didn't even smile. I just sat still and let the storm do what storms do, clear the air. A few days later, I returned to the hospital for a follow-up appointment. It was a basic check-in. Labs, vitals, nothing complicated. But something had shifted in the staff. When I gave my name at the front desk, the woman paused. "Oh," she said, her voice quieting. "Give me just a moment." She disappeared for longer than necessary. Eventually, a nurse came out. Not my regular one. This was someone older, maybe in her 50s, eyes sharp, shoulders squared. She introduced herself with a tone that felt rehearsed. Ms. Wilson, we've reviewed your case and we'd like to apologize. I blinked. For what? She exhaled slowly, like she didn't quite believe she had to say it aloud. Your admission was flagged by internal ethics as a red alert, critical patient with no family contact. That should have triggered a follow-up protocol. It didn't. That's on us. She paused. We also know that your story went viral. Not because of you, we know that. But it's out there. I nodded. She looked at me squarely. The hospital's legal team would like to offer support if you wish to pursue any legal recourse for emotional negligence. You don't have to decide now. I stared at her for a long moment, then shook my head. I'm not looking for punishment, I said. Just space. She smiled, a little sad. Sometimes that's the strongest boundary you can set. After the checkup, I stepped into the hallway near the waiting room. That's when I saw them. Vera, Clyde. They were standing near the nurse's station, both looking distinctly out of place. My mother wore oversized sunglasses indoors. My father was wringing his hands, the way he always did when caught without a script. They hadn't seen me yet. I turned to leave, quiet, simple, but before I could, a nurse walked past them, stopping in front of my parents. Can I help you? She asked. We're here to see Morwenna Wilson, my father said. The nurse checked her tablet. I'm sorry, but you're not listed as her emergency contacts. Vera adjusted her glasses. We're her parents. The nurse's voice didn't change. I understand, but legally, you have no access to her medical records or visitation. Clyde took a step forward. There must be a mistake. I'm her father. The nurse's expression hardened, not cruel, just resolute. Sir, you lost that right when she almost lost her life alone. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just watched. From the corner of the hallway, I stood behind the angled wall, only half in view. I could see them, but not be seen. Vera's face crumpled, not with tears, but confusion, like the rules had shifted, and no one told her. That's when Evadine, who had come with me for the checkup, stepped up beside me. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, gently, she placed her hand on my back. Let them see how it feels to be on the outside, I said softly. Evadine nodded. This is what reclaiming your story looks like, honey. I didn't need to step forward. I didn't need to scream or cry or explain. That moment did the talking. And when the truth finally arrives, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door open. The nurse opened the door softly and motioned for them to enter. I wasn't there. The bed was made, corners tucked in tightly. There were no flowers, no folded blankets, no signs of life. Just a small white envelope resting on the nightstand, addressed in blue ink. For Vera and Clyde. That was all I left behind. I was already home. I'd checked out early that morning, quietly, just after the blood work came back normal. Evadine had picked me up and we drove through downtown without saying much. I didn't tell her about the envelope until we were halfway back. She didn't ask what was in it. Vera and Clyde had come too late. Again, inside the envelope, the letter was short, deliberate. You chose to walk the dog. I chose to walk away. This time, I won't look back. No dear, no love, no apologies. I had nothing left to explain. They stood there in the room for over 20 minutes, I was told later. Vera didn't sit. Clyde did, on the chair beside the bed. He stared at the wall like he expected it to give him a line to say. Vera held the letter in her hand, folding and unfolding it like she couldn't decide whether to believe it. But it was real. More real than any of their reasons. Later that week, I heard she submitted an article to a small local magazine, a personal essay. It was titled, The Misunderstood Mother, A Story of Love Misread. I didn't read it at first. I didn't need to. But the internet did. Within hours of publication, the comments were brutal. Not because she had critics, but because she had witnesses. Screenshots began surfacing, old Facebook posts, snippets from Callista's dog-themed influencer account, even the party photos where I was cropped out. Someone posted, "You can't rewrite history when the receipts are archived." Another added, "You didn't forget her, you deleted her." Someone even embedded the Reddit thread. The magazine's digital editor removed the article within 48 hours. Vera never released a follow-up. And Callista? She tried to save face. Made a teary video in her car, no makeup, shaky voice. I lost my dog, and I'm losing my family, she said, voice cracking for the camera. But the internet didn't flinch. The top comment read, "Your sister almost lost her life. You were walking a Pomeranian." That comment got pinned. Her sponsorships disappeared faster than sympathy. Brand deals pulled quietly. Partnerships ghosted her. One by one, the curated life she'd built around polished photos and dog mom hashtags fell apart. She turned off the comments 2 days later, but not before someone clipped the worst part of the video and shared it to TikTok with the caption, "When the golden child gets canceled." It went viral. 20 million views in a weekend. I watched none of it live, Evadine told me. She sat beside me in a quiet cafe just off the main street, sliding her phone across the table like it was hot to the touch. "You don't have to watch it," she said, "but you should know, it's out there." I looked down at the screen. Vera's article, Callista's Meltdown, a clip from a local news segment interviewing a retired nurse about family trauma in the healthcare system. They never used my name, but everyone knew it was me. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I just whispered to myself, "I'm not healed, but I'm clean." Evadine stirred her tea. "You sure you're okay?" I nodded. They taught me I was forgettable. I taught myself that I'm unforgettable. We sat in silence for a while. Then the waitress came with our order, avocado toast and a side of fresh fruit. I'd ordered without thinking. It used to be my mother's favorite. Funny how things change. Evadine looked at me gently. "Would you ever let them back in?" I didn't answer right away. I took a sip of my coffee, watching the steam curl around the edge of the cup. "Only if they knock," I said. "Only if they knock, apologize, and come with empty hands." She nodded, as if she'd expected that. "But I won't be leaving the door open." End of chapter 8. After the last time I told Evadine I wouldn't be leaving the door open, I meant it. Not out of hatred, not even anger, really. Just finality. Like you finally realize the room you've been knocking on your whole life has no one on the other side. So you turn the knob one last time, then walk away for good. A few weeks later it happened. Snowy died. I didn't hear it from Callista. I saw it in a clip. A shaky, poorly lit video she posted online, her face pale, puffy, and far from filtered. "He choked on a chew toy," she said, voice cracking. "I was there. I tried. I thought he was everything. And now I don't know who I am without being someone's favorite." For a second I didn't move. I just watched. Because there it was, the first time she had no audience to clap for her. No mom reposting her video with a dozen hearts. No dad reminding everyone to be proud of your sister. Just silence, and the sting of knowing that no one was watching her cry but strangers. I didn't share the video, I didn't respond, but it stayed in my memory longer than I expected. I thought I'd feel smug, vindicated even, but all I felt was empty. 2 days later, Clyde tried calling me. I let it ring. Vera didn't call. But 3 hours after Clyde's missed call, I got a message from the hospital. "Your mother has been admitted," the nurse said on voicemail. "Mild cardiac event. She's stable now, but she asked if you were notified." I didn't call back, but I did drive there. It was dusk by the time I arrived. The sky low and soft, streetlights flickering on in tired intervals. I parked on the far side of the lot and sat in the car for 15 minutes, just watching the entrance. Evadine had come with me again. She didn't talk much, just held her travel mug of tea like it was grounding her. "You sure you want to do this?" she asked finally. I nodded. "I'm not going in." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push. I walked to the sliding ER doors and stopped before they opened. There was a bench off to the side, so I sat there. No one noticed me. No one recognized me. I watched a young man walk in holding his girlfriend's hand, a mother leading her child with a fever, an older couple holding each other's coats. I wondered who was sitting next to my mother inside, probably Clyde, maybe Callista, maybe no one. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the flower I'd brought. One white camellia, soft, delicate. My grandmother used to say they meant, I forgive, but I don't forget. I scribbled a note on the back of an old receipt I found in my bag. I survived what you chose not to face. I wish you peace, not presents. I folded the paper, tucked it beneath the stem, and placed the flower on the bench just outside the sliding doors. Then I walked back to the car. I didn't look over my shoulder. A week passed before I heard anything again. It came in the form of an email. Subject line, I don't expect forgiveness. The sender was Callista. The body read, but I understand now. I really do. That was all. No dramatics, no fake vulnerability. Just a sentence that made me pause. I didn't respond, but I moved it out of the inbox, created a folder, labeled it, maybe. I kept living. I started volunteering more regularly at the community health clinic. Not because I had to, but because it reminded me of what love looks like when it's given without obligation. One Saturday, I was asked to lead a workshop at the rec center for kids. Basic health habits, nutrition, that kind of thing. The crowd was small, a dozen kids, maybe. Half paying attention, half doodling on their notebooks. Near the end, a little girl, curly-haired, bright-eyed, raised her hand. Do families always love you? She asked. The room went still. Even the boy who'd been fidgeting with his shoes looked up. I didn't pause long. Sometimes, I said, sometimes they don't know how. But you still deserve to be loved fully. She nodded, like that made sense to her. Like I hadn't just told her something heavy. Afterward, I packed up the handouts, waved goodbye to the center staff, and walked to my car, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not fixed, not finished, but freer. That night, I sat on my balcony with a blanket around my shoulders. The city buzzed faintly in the background, like a hum I no longer needed to tune out. I sipped my tea and thought of all the things I used to beg for. An apology, a seat at the table, a single, I'm proud of you. And now I had something better. A self that didn't need to be proven. A life that didn't depend on theirs. They couldn't love me the way I needed, I whispered aloud. So I learned to love myself without conditions. This isn't a happy ending. It's an honest beginning, because survival is only the start. Now comes the living. Sometimes family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when it truly matters. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or unchosen by the people who should have loved you first, Morwena's story reminds us, your worth isn't measured by their approval. It's measured by how fiercely you choose yourself when no one else does. Have you ever had to walk away from people who refuse to see your value? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw, and powerful family stories like this one.